Justina was returning home after an exhausting day at work. Her steps were heavy and tired, and the thought of lying down in bed brought her a slight relief. She took off her shoes at the door, leaving her coat on the back of the chair in the hallway, and headed to her bedroom. The darkness was comforting, and the usually quiet house seemed like a perfect refuge after the tumult of the day. However, just as she laid her head on the pillow, she heard a strange sound coming from her grandfather's room. The sounds were whispered, almost imperceptible, but distinct enough to catch her attention. Her heart skipped a beat. What could it be? She wondered, trying to dispel her unease. Perhaps her grandfather was talking in his sleep, as he had done on other occasions. Nonetheless, curiosity and a shadow of concern pushed her to get out of bed and go towards her grandfather's room. The door was slightly ajar, and the faint moonlight streamed through the window, casting long shadows on the floor. Justina held her breath and reached for the handle. As she opened the door, her gaze was caught by a figure sitting on the edge of the bed. "Grandpa, what are you doing?" she asked, her voice firm but with a hint of relief. She was convinced that her grandfather had woken up and needed something. The figure slowly turned towards her, and at that moment, her blood froze in her veins. It wasn't her grandfather. In the pale light, Justina recognized the face of her brother, Matej. He was looking at her with empty eyes, a faint smile at the corner of his lips. The girl felt her legs tremble, and a scream escaped involuntarily from her throat. "Matej? No, this isn't possible," she whispered, retreating backward towards the wall. Matej had died 8 years ago in a tragic accident, and his loss had left a deep wound in the family's heart. Since then, Justina had tried to make peace with the pain, but that night had brought her face to face with her greatest fear. Matej, or whatever seemed to be him, said nothing. He slowly rose from the bed, walking towards her with soft steps, almost floating. The girl couldn't move, feeling as if reality was collapsing around her. She clenched her fists, trying to convince herself that what she was seeing was just a nightmare. "You're not real," she whispered, her wide, terrified eyes following Matej. But he didn't stop. As he approached, he reached out his hand, and his voice, the same one she hadn't heard in 8 years, echoed in the terrifying silence of the room. "Justina, I've come to protect you. Don't be afraid." The girl felt a cold shiver run through her entire body. She felt his hand touch her arm, but the touch was unnatural, as if a hand of ice had touched her skin. With a final effort, she pulled herself out of the trance and ran out of the room, the door slamming loudly behind her. She sought refuge in her own room, slamming the door and pressing her back against it. Her breath was ragged, and her heart pounded wildly. She raised her hand, realizing that where Matej had touched her, her skin was as cold as ice. In the oppressive silence, she heard that whisper again, but this time it was coming from right outside her door. "Justina, open the door. I won't hurt you." It wasn't just a bad dream anymore. Something, or someone, wearing her brother's face, had returned from an unknown realm and had come for her.